Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am Mercedes and this is the Frugal Life with Mercedes. So this video is going to be a little bit different than what I usually do, but I did mention a few months back that I am taking my voice back and I am going to talk about whatever sparks my interest at the moment. If this video is not for you, that's okay. Just a disclaimer, we're going to talk about cheating, we're going to talk about trauma and pain, not necessarily positive things, and I do try to keep it positive, but I've got a few of these videos that I'm going to be making, and really the reason behind it, one is I'm trying to get my voice back, the other is I believe that this is healing me, but I think it'll also help somebody else that maybe will find themselves, unfortunately, in a similar situation or have found themselves in that situation, and just solidarity. So if you are new here, if this video is your first video with me, my videos are usually very uplifting, but I hope that you get something out of this. So I have said before, if you've previously viewed my channel, I have had 3 husbands. Now, the first one was just a spiritual marriage. We were not legally married. The second one, we were legally married. And my current husband, I call him husband because we are spiritually married, but we will be legally married in a couple of months. So that's just a little groundwork for you. And these 3 men, are who I've spent my life with from 19 years old to almost 35. So the first one left me for his work wife. Now, work wife is something people say a lot, like in a playful way, but that actually did happen to me. So I've never shared this story publicly before, so just bear with me. Just for some background, essentially, when I was 19 years old, the summer after I graduated, I met a man through a mutual friend. So the guy in question was my neighbor, and he went to church with this guy, and we somehow, met each other, and we went out a few times, and I have to tell you, the first time that I met him, I love at first sight. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, I had never, and I get it, I was 19, but I have felt that feeling 3 times in my life, and all 3 of them were my husbands. So that's not like happens every time I went on a date with somebody. But I was just completely smitten. Like, I was 19 and I was getting ready to head off to college, and I just was like, oh my goodness, this is the man for me. Like, I was just like, I'm done. But I could tell he had commitment issues, and, he was kind of squirrely, like he couldn't be pinned down. So, some time passed, and I went away to college, and we would Facebook message each other once in a while, like we were Facebook friends, but I'm all this time loving him from afar. And at some point in I guess when I was 20, so the next year, we went on a couple more dates, but it was always very casual, do you know what I mean? Then he ended up moving to California, and I got, I was moving on, living my life. I wasn't sitting here waiting around for this guy. And then at some point when I was 22, I believe, he came back to Virginia, and he was like, hey, I'm visiting my family, I'd really like to, go out to dinner with you. And essentially he moved in with me. I had my own apartment, and he admitted that he had been in love with me since our first date, blah, 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 blah. So I had never lived with anybody, and we weren't even like boyfriend and girlfriend or anything. And I was like, come live with me, live in my apartment. And something I did not know until we were living together was that he had an addiction. So I did not know that. And so, we're living together, and our relationship, I hate to say it, it was really great, but it would have a lot of the time it was awesome, but then there would be these really like not so great moments. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not just talking about like the ups and downs of a relationship. I'm talking about just like really inappropriate behavior on his part. And there was a situation where he had gone out to a bar or a club or something like that, and it kind of came back to me that he was making out with some girl, and I confronted him about it, and he was like, well, I'm in he just kind of blamed it all on his addiction, and he didn't remember, and blah 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 blah. And I just was like, if this happens again, like I'm done. Like, I made it perfectly clear. And we kept living together, and he's still in his addiction, and that was like a big issue. And I just kept staying. And now, like in hindsight, there were so many red flags, like it's not even funny, like, all these years later. And I also want to say that like, this isn't because I was 20 couple. This happens to people of all ages. You know what I mean? Like that can happen where you're just so like enamored with somebody, and you're so committed to them, and you have a life together, and you're building a life together, that you put up with things that you should not put up with. So essentially, one night he just did not come home, and the details on this are a little fuzzy. Because I have PTSD from that situation. And so even though it's been many years, because at this point I was 24, so that was over a decade ago. And because it was so traumatic, like some of the details, some of them have come back and some of them have not. And obviously I'm not going to like disclose every single thing just because, it's not good. But basically from what I remember, he just did not come home. And of course, like what are you thinking? I'm thinking he's dead in a ditch somewhere, like, especially because of his addiction. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm like blowing up his phone and like blah, blah, blah. And I basically don't sleep. Now, I did not contact his parents because I had contacted them other times when he had, done different things. And I just was like, okay, I need to handle this. And I didn't call the police because he hadn't been, he just didn't come home. I had no proof that he was, kidnapped or, injured or anything. And, but I'm just like, what is going on? What is going on? And at some point early in the morning, I got a message from his phone from it was not him texting. It was somebody else. And they were like, why are you blowing up my boyfriend's phone? And I was like, he's my partner. We live together. We've been together for like over 3 years, but this, almost 3 years at this point. And this person disclosed that he was with her, like at her home, and that they had been dating for months and blah, 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 blah. And so that all came out. And then Actually, if I'm remembering correctly, that was not the first time he didn't come home. I think it happened once or twice before, because when I told my mom about this time, she was like, well, is this the first time? And I'm like, no. And she's like, oh my goodness, Mercedes. And so I was like, yeah, I know. But I had never told anybody because I was just so embarrassed of all this stuff. And he always had some sort of slick answer for why he hadn't come home. So again, I wasn't, reading the red flags. So essentially it came out that this woman he worked with, and when I found out her name, he had told me about this lady at work. He called her this sweet little old lady that he worked with, and he made it sound like a grandmotherly figure. Now, this woman was in her early 40s, and him and I were in our early 20s. So there was a huge age gap, but she wasn't like somebody's little grandma. Do you know what I mean? So essentially what all came out was that she did know about me, but he had told her that we had broken up and we were just still living together until the lease was over. But he had never had her over to the house. She had never met any of his friends. She didn't even know where he lived, like what town or anything. She had never met his family and like all this stuff. But they had been together for several months. And I'm like, you didn't know where he lived, but you've been dating him for several months and you've never met any of his friends. You've never met any of his family. And you knew he was living with his ex-girlfriend in a one-bedroom apartment. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many things, but that's a her issue. And then sometime after that, I found out that she was having a baby. She was having his baby. And he did not tell me, she did. And there was a whole big thing like that if I didn't leave him alone, then she was going to terminate the pregnancy. And she was calling me a homewrecker and just like all these things that were really terrible. Do you know what I mean? That was terrible. And then at some point later on, I found out that there were lots of women that he was involved with while we were involved, all women from work, and some of them I met because I would go to his place of work and have lunch with him. I went to work parties. He had multiple pictures of me on his desk at work. Like, they knew about me. And not as an ex. Do you know what I mean? Like, they knew of me as his current romantic partner. So yeah, that all happened. And then, he kept saying he wasn't going to be like with her anymore, but I knew that he was. And I ended up moving out and getting my own apartment, just leaving the situation. And, he's still trying to like get with me, but like he's trying to be like with both of us. And I was like, I'm not going to be a part of that. And I just remember asking him like, you're not going to stop seeing her, are you? Because he was trying to say like, oh, her and I aren't going to be together. I'm going to try to like co-parent, blah, blah, blah. But he was still romantically involved with her and trying to be romantically involved with me. And I was like, you're just not going to stop seeing her. And he knew what I meant, like romantically. And he's like, no, I'm not. And I was like, okay, then then you need to just leave me alone and let me live my life. And that is how I got into a lot of debt because of that situation, which I've talked about a little bit and I have to take accountability for. But essentially I was not in a position to leave. But I had to leave. So I had to do first and last month's rent on a credit card. And I just had to avoid, I had just had to get out of that situation.